Some words cut so deep they leave scars on the soul, and some letters are written in tears that never dry. Today's story comes from Dorothy, an 82-year-old woman living in Sunset Manor nursing home. 3 months ago, her son Michael dropped her off with 2 suitcases and words that shattered her heart. "You're nothing but dead weight, Mom. I can't carry you anymore." But what Michael doesn't know, what Dorothy wrote in a letter she keeps hidden in her Bible. Inside this letter lies a truth that changes everything about sacrifice, love, and the weight of unconditional devotion. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next letters we share here. And if you enjoy this kind of video, please give this one a like. It really helps this channel grow. I'm writing this on the back of a church bulletin from Sunday service here at Sunset Manor. The paper is thin as tissue. And my fountain pen, the same blue Waterman your father gave me for our anniversary, 47 years ago, keeps bleeding through. But somehow, that feels right. Words this heavy should leave marks that can't be erased. The chaplain's sermon today was about forgiveness. Funny how God has a sense of timing, isn't it? He spoke about carrying burdens, about the weight we place on each other's shoulders without realizing. I sat in that metal folding chair, the kind they use in church basements and funeral homes, and felt every word like a stone dropping into still water, creating ripples I couldn't stop. My hands shake more now. The arthritis started in my thumbs 2 years ago, and has been creeping through my fingers like ivy on a fence post. Slow but determined. Dr. Rodriguez says it's normal for my age, but nothing about this feels normal. Nothing about being here, in this beige room with its single window facing the parking lot, feels like anything I ever planned for my golden years. It's been 93 days since you left me here. I count them like rosary beads, each one a small prayer for understanding. 93 mornings of waking up to fluorescent lights and the sound of Eleanor next door crying for her daughter, Rebecca. 93 evenings of wondering if today would be the day you'd call, just to see how I'm settling in. The nurses are kind enough. Maria, she's the one with the gentle hands and the way of humming hymns while she checks my blood pressure, reminds me of your grandmother. Same patience, same soft voice when delivering hard truths. "Mrs. Patterson," she said yesterday while helping me with my medications, "your son, does he know how much you miss him?" I couldn't answer her because the words got tangled up somewhere between my heart and my throat. "You called me dead weight, Michael." Those words echo in these sterile hallways every single day, bouncing off the beige walls like a cruel song I can't stop hearing. They mix with the sounds of wheelchairs squeaking down the corridor, with Mrs. Henderson's television always too loud, with the dinner bell that rings at 4:30 sharp, because old people apparently eat like children, early and without choice. But there's something you don't know about being a burden, son. Something I never told you because mothers aren't supposed to itemize their love, aren't supposed to present receipts for the ways we carry our children through life. Heavy love. It's funny how the heaviest things we carry are often the ones we choose to pick up in the first place. I keep your baby photos in my jewelry box, the one with the ballerina that still spins when you wind the tiny key, though her pink tutu is faded now to the color of old roses. The music plays Fur-Elise, slow and tinny, each note like a memory, refusing to stay buried. Yesterday, I wound that little key and held the picture of you at 6 months old, all chubby cheeks and toothless grins, while Beethoven played from a music box no bigger than my palm. You were premature, Michael. 7 months and 4 days, which the doctors kept saying like it was a math problem we could solve if we just understood the equation. But life isn't mathematics, is it? Life is sitting in an uncomfortable hospital chair for 72 hours straight, watching your tiny chest rise and fall in that plastic incubator that looked more like a science experiment than a cradle. Your father wanted to go home that first night. "Dorothy," he said, his hand heavy on my shoulder, "we need rest. The doctors will call if anything changes." But how could I explain that watching you breathe was my rest? That every rise of your little chest was proof that love could keep someone alive? That faith could weigh more than fear? The NICU smelled like antiseptic and hope mixed together. I learned the sounds of all the machines, the steady beep of your heart monitor that became my lullaby, the whoosh of the ventilator that was breathing for you those first crucial days, the soft hum of the incubator that kept you warm when my arms couldn't. I memorized the pattern of your breathing, counted each tiny exhale like prayer beads. Nurse Catherine, she worked the night shift and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, called me stubborn. "Mrs. Patterson," she'd say, bringing me coffee in a paper cup that burned my fingers. "You need to take care of yourself, too. This little one needs his mama healthy." But how could I explain that watching you was taking care of myself? That every breath you drew was oxygen for my own lungs? I was overwhelming then too, I suppose. Refusing to leave your side, sleeping curled up in that blue vinyl chair that left permanent creases in my back, eating cafeteria sandwiches that tasted like cardboard and worry. The other mothers in the NICU would go home for showers, for real meals, for a few hours of sleep in their own beds. But I stayed, always there, always hovering, always making myself heavier than necessary in the spaces where you needed lightness to breathe. But you lived, Michael, on your 18th day in that plastic box. You opened your eyes and looked directly at me, not past me, not through me, but at me, like you'd been waiting all that time for our eyes to meet. The doctor said it was coincidence, that newborns can't focus that early, but I knew better. I knew you were saying thank you for carrying the weight of worry, for being too stubborn to let go. For 37 years after that moment, I never once regretted the heaviness of loving you completely. The morning you turned 7, you asked for a bicycle, a red Schwinn like Tommy Morrison's from down the street, with streamers on the handlebars and a bell that rang clear as church chimes. I remember that request so clearly because it came on the same morning I found the lump in my breast while reaching for your favorite cereal on the top shelf. Funny how life gives you gifts and takes them away in the same breath, wrapped in the ordinary moments we think will last forever. I never told you about the cancer, sweetheart. You were just a child, and children shouldn't have to carry their mother's fears in their backpacks, along with their homework and their lunch money. For 6 months, I drove myself to chemotherapy appointments every Tuesday and Thursday while you were at school, timing it so I'd be back before your bus pulled up to our house at 3:15 sharp. Those chemo sessions, Michael, they made me feel like I was drowning from the inside out. The medicine tasted like metal pennies dissolving on my tongue. And afterward, I'd sit in the McDonald's parking lot, the one on Elm Street with the broken playground where we used to go for Happy Meals, and throw up into a brown paper bag I kept in my glove compartment for that purpose. But then I'd buy you a Happy Meal anyway, because routine was the only thing keeping our world from falling apart completely. I'd sit in that drive-through line, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and order your usual chicken nuggets, apple slices, chocolate milk, and whatever toy they were giving away that month. The smell of those French fries made me want to die, but your smile when I walked through the door made living worth the nausea. Your father left us that winter. I found his note on the kitchen counter next to your homework. Math problems about addition and subtraction that seemed like cruel irony given what was happening to our family. I can't handle a sick wife and a needy kid. He wrote in his careful accountant handwriting, "I'm sorry, as if abandoning your family was something you could apologize for, like bumping into someone at the grocery store. He left on a Tuesday, garbage day, and I remember thinking it was fitting that he'd disappear with the rest of the week's refuse. You asked where Daddy went, and I told you he had to travel for work. I kept telling you that for 3 months until you stopped asking, and then I told you the truth. Sometimes people get scared and make choices that hurt the people they love. The insurance money ran out by March. Your father had been the one with the good benefits, and his departure left us with medical bills that multiplied like weeds in an untended garden. I took a second job cleaning offices at night, Hartman and Associates on 5th Street, where I'd arrive at 10 p.m. with a cart full of supplies and leave at 6 a.m. with fingers that smelled like bleach and a back that ached like penance. Some mornings I'd fall asleep standing up at the stove while making your breakfast, and you'd find me there at 6:30, spatula still in my hand, pancakes burning on the griddle. You'd wake me gently, even at 7. You had such careful hands, and say, "Mama, the smoke alarm is beeping." I'd apologize and start over, and you'd just hug my legs and say, "It's okay, Mama. I like burnt pancakes anyway. Mama's just tired." "Baby," I'd tell you, running my fingers through your sleep-messed hair, "Mama's just carrying a little extra weight today." And you'd nod solemnly, like you understood that sometimes mothers have to carry invisible things that make them slower, heavier, more fragile than they used to be. But we got you that red Schwinn for your birthday. I remember the morning we walked to Peterson's bike shop, my hand in your small one, both of us practically vibrating with excitement. You climbed on that bike like it was a horse you'd been waiting your whole life to ride. And when you pedaled around the store, bell ringing, streamers flying, your joy was so pure, it made the weight of everything else disappear. Just for a moment. Block 4, the price of dreams. When you turned 16, you wanted a car. Not just any car. A Mustang convertible like the one in those magazines you kept hidden under your bed, next to the baseball cards and the letters from colleges that were starting to take notice of your grades. I found those magazines one day while changing your sheets. Saw how you'd circled the red convertible on page 43, drawn arrows pointing to the leather seats and the chrome details. I worked 3 jobs that summer. 3, the diner during breakfast shift, where I learned to carry 4 plates at once and smile through the exhaustion that lived in my bones. The department store in the afternoons, folding clothes that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and helping women my age find dresses for occasions I'd never be invited to. And then the offices, at night, pushing my cleaning cart through empty corridors that echoed with the ghosts of other people's important conversations. My feet bled in my shoes, Michael, not metaphorically. Literally bled from standing on linoleum and concrete for 14 hours a day. I'd come home and soak them in a plastic basin filled with warm water and Epsom salt, counting the tips from my apron pocket while my ankles turned purple with exhaustion. Singles and 5s and 10s, money that smelled like bacon grease and floor wax and other people's problems, folded into my future. The other waitresses at the diner started calling me Machine, because I never took breaks, never called in sick, never said no to picking up extra shifts. "Dorothy," Marge would say while we folded napkins at the end of the night, "you're gonna work yourself to death. That boy doesn't know how lucky he is." But luck had nothing to do with it. This was love in its most practical form. Love translated into overtime hours and double shifts, and feet that might never stop hurting. I remember the night I finally had enough saved. It was a Thursday in August, and I drove to Peterson's used cars with an envelope full of crumpled bills. 1s, 5s, 10s that looked like they'd been through a washing machine, but each one representing an hour of my life I'd traded for your dream. Mr. Peterson counted it twice, shaking his head like he'd never seen anything so pathetic. "This is for your boy," he asked, holding the envelope like it contained something contagious. "For my son," I said. And my voice was steady even though my knees were shaking from standing for so long, from wanting this moment to be perfect. Despite the imperfection of how we'd arrived here, the car wasn't perfect. Rust spots on the bumper that looked like freckles, a dent in the driver's door that the previous owner had tried to hide with touch-up paint, a radio that only picked up AM stations. But when you saw it, Michael, your face lit up like Christmas morning, and 4th of July rolled into one impossible moment of pure joy. You walked around that car 3 times, running your hands over the hood, checking the tires, opening and closing the doors like you couldn't believe something so wonderful could actually belong to you. "Mom," you said, and your voice cracked on that one word. "Mom, I can't believe. How did you—" And then you hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack, and you whispered against my shoulder, "Thank you, Mama. I love you so much. I love you so much it hurts." I carried that hug with me through every double shift after that, through every aching foot, and every night I fell asleep at the kitchen table with bills spread around me like a paper puzzle I couldn't quite solve. When people asked me how I managed to buy you a car on a waitress's salary, I'd just smile and say, you make it work when it matters. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. Love doesn't feel heavy when you're carrying it towards someone else's happiness. You called me a burden 3 months ago, but love was never supposed to be light, was it? The best things we carry. Babies, dreams, hopes, promises. They're supposed to have substance, supposed to require strength we didn't know we had. State University was your dream, and dreams aren't cheap, baby. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. I remember because it was garbage day, and I almost threw out the mail without looking, assuming it was just another bill or advertisement. But there it was, thick cream paper with the university seal embossed in gold. Your name typed in formal letters that made my hands shake as I opened it. Congratulations, Michael Patterson. We are pleased to inform you. I read that letter 17 times before you got home from your part-time job at the hardware store, memorizing every word like it was scripture. When you walked through the door, sawdust still dusting your work shirt, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the letter spread in front of me like a treasure map. Mom, you said, seeing my face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I whispered, and then louder. Everything's right. Everything's finally right. Your grades were good, but not scholarship good, and we both knew what that meant. Full tuition, room and board, books. Everything that separated you from your future had a price tag attached. I sat with those numbers for 3 days, adding and subtracting, trying to make mathematics bend to the shape of a mother's determination. I remortgaged the house, our little blue house on Maple Street, the one your father and I bought when you were 2, the one with your height marks penciled on the doorframe of your bedroom closet. I signed papers I didn't fully understand, used words like equity and adjustable rate, while sitting across from a banker who looked younger than you, and spoke about our home like it was just numbers on a spreadsheet. The loan officer, Mr. Jenkins with his crisp shirt and careful smile, kept asking if I was sure. Mrs. Patterson, this is a substantial financial commitment. Are you confident you can manage the payments? I wanted to tell him that confidence had nothing to do with it. This was about love, about the weight of a mother's promise to carry her child as far as her strength would allow. 4 years, Michael. 4 years of ramen noodles for dinner so I could send you care packages full of homemade chocolate chip cookies, the ones you loved with extra vanilla, and just a pinch of sea salt. I'd bake them on Sunday nights, humming while I worked, imagining your face when you opened the box in your dorm room. 4 years of shopping at thrift stores and yard sales, finding joy in 50-cent treasures while your tuition checks cleared without bouncing. I became an expert at making something from nothing, soup from leftover vegetables, and hope, entertainment from library books and imagination, contentment from watching you succeed, even from 200 miles away. When people asked how I was managing, I'd say, "Oh, you know how it is," and change the subject, because how do you explain that eating crackers for lunch feels like abundance when it means your child is learning calculus and literature and all the beautiful, important things that will carry him away from the smallness of your life? You came home for Christmas junior year with a girl named Jessica. Pretty thing, all blonde hair and careful smiles and a way of looking around our little house with those polite eyes that miss nothing. She complimented the tree, our scraggly pine with ornaments collected over 20 years of post-Christmas sales, and said our turkey smelled rustic. I'd never heard anyone describe food as rustic before, but I smiled and said thank you anyway. I heard her whispering to you in the kitchen Christmas morning while I was making coffee in my good china cups, the ones with tiny roses that had been my mother's. Your mom seems overwhelming, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone young women use when they're trying to be kind while delivering criticism. She's just so much. Does she always hover like this? Overwhelming. I suppose another word for that might be heavy. Too present. Too interested. Too invested in the son I had spent 21 years raising. I stood in the hallway, holding that coffee pot like an anchor, and realized I was seeing myself through her eyes. The mother who tried too hard, loved too obviously, Cared too much about things that sophisticated people handle with elegant distance. You graduated summa cum laude on a Saturday in May. That felt like the culmination of everything I'd ever worked for. I cried through the whole ceremony. Ugly tears that left mascara stains on my good dress, the navy blue one I'd bought special for the occasion at Goodwill for $12, altered by hand to fit properly. You walked across that stage in your cap and gown, and I thought, this is it. This is what all the wait was for. This moment of pride that made every sacrifice feel light as air. But proud mothers at graduations are common as dandelions, aren't they? And children, once they've gotten what they need to fly, sometimes forget who taught them to believe in their wings. Marriage changes things, doesn't it, sweetheart? Not all at once, not like a door slamming shut, but slowly, like water wearing a waystone. After the wedding, that beautiful ceremony in Jessica's parents' garden, where I smiled until my face hurt and paid for flowers I couldn't afford, the phone calls started getting shorter. Sunday conversations became Sunday text messages, then every other Sunday text messages, then messages that felt more like duty than desire. "How are you doing, Mom?" you'd ask, but I learned to hear the invisible clock ticking behind the question, measuring how long this call might last before you needed to get back to your real life. So I started giving shorter answers. "Fine, honey. Everything's fine." Because who wants to hear about arthritis starting in your thumbs, or the way the house creaks differently when there's only one person walking through it, or how I'd started talking to your childhood stuffed rabbit because the silence was becoming too heavy to carry alone. Jessica was polite. I'll give her that. Never said I couldn't visit. Never made rules about when or how often. But there were always reasons why it wasn't a good time. Michael's mom wants to come for the weekend, but we're renovating the bathroom. She was hoping to visit for Easter, but my family already made plans. Maybe next month would be better. Work is just so crazy right now. I learned to read the spaces between words, the pauses that meant but, even when no one said it out loud. "We'd love to see you, but you're always welcome. But maybe soon, but..." The word but became the period at the end of every invitation I didn't receive. When your first daughter was born, little Sarah with her angel face and your stubborn chin, I drove 4 hours to meet her. 4 hours of practicing what I'd say, how I'd behave, reminding myself to be helpful but not intrusive, loving but not overwhelming, present but not too present. I brought a quilt I'd made by hand, pink and yellow squares sewn together over 3 months of evenings, while watching old movies and imagining the granddaughter who would snuggle under it. The quilt took me 97 hours to complete. I know because I timed myself, wanting to be able to tell Sarah someday exactly how much love was stitched into every seam. Pink for joy, yellow for sunshine, and a border of tiny flowers that I embroidered while my fingers learned new kinds of aches. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. Each stitch a prayer for this baby I hadn't met yet. Jessica held it for exactly 10 seconds before setting it aside on the nursery chair. "Thanks, Dorothy. It's really sweet. We're just trying to keep everything minimalist right now." Minimalist. I learned that word meant a lot of things. No clutter, no excess, no handmade quilts from grandmothers who didn't understand that love could be too much, too obvious, too heavy for modern life. I saw Sarah only 6 times in her first 2 years. 6 visits that I planned like military campaigns, checking and double-checking that the dates worked for everyone, bringing gifts that were useful but not excessive, staying just long enough to help, but not long enough to impose. Each visit felt like walking on ice that might crack if I stepped too heavily in any direction. 6 times to watch my granddaughter grow, while other grandmothers got to see first steps, hear first words, be part of the daily magic of childhood unfolding. The second grandbaby, little Michael Jr., I met when he was already walking. You sent me a birth announcement in the mail. Professional photographs with expensive cardstock and calligraphy that spelled out his full name, weight and birth date like he was a stranger's baby I might admire politely. I learned about his birth the same way your mailman did, 3 days after he arrived in the world. I kept that announcement on my refrigerator for months, held there with a magnet shaped like an apple that you'd made in third-grade art class. Sometimes I'd stand in my kitchen at night, looking at my grandson's perfect little face in that formal photograph, and wonder what his laugh sounded like, whether he had your curious eyes or Jessica's careful smile, if he'd ever know that somewhere in a little house on Maple Street, his grandmother was learning how to love him from a distance that grew longer every year. The stroke happened on a Thursday morning in March, right in the middle of making my coffee. One moment I was spooning sugar into my favorite mug, the one with forget-me-nots that you gave me for Mother's Day when you were 12, and the next moment, the left side of my face felt like it belonged to someone else, like I was wearing a mask that didn't fit properly. It wasn't a big stroke, just a little episode, Dr. Rodriguez said, like it was a hiccup instead of my brain misfiring like a broken Christmas light. But it scared me, Michael. For the first time in my life, I felt fragile, breakable, like something precious that had been dropped once and might shatter completely if it happened again. I called you from the hospital emergency room, sitting in one of those wheelchairs they make you use, even when you can walk perfectly fine. My phone felt heavy in my hands. Everything felt heavy that day, weighted with the sudden knowledge that bodies fail, that independence can disappear faster than morning frost. In sunlight, your voice sounded distracted when you answered, busy and professional and very far away. Mom, what's up? I'm in a meeting. I'm in the hospital. Sweetheart. The words came out thick and strange, my tongue not quite cooperating with my intentions. Even my voice felt like extra weight. The silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped, if the universe was playing one more cruel joke on a day that had already taken enough from me. Then, what happened? Are you okay? Which hospital? I told you about the stroke, about the tests they were running, about how the left side of my face felt like it was made of clay that hadn't quite dried yet. You said you'd try to come up that weekend, but Friday afternoon brought a text instead. Work emergency. Rain check? We'll call tonight. Rain check. As if my health was a baseball game that could be rescheduled for a more convenient time, when your calendar wasn't so full of obligations that mattered more than the woman who gave you life. The physical therapy was harder than I expected. Simple things became mountains to climb. Buttoning shirts, opening jars, walking without holding onto walls like a child learning to navigate the world for the first time. My left hand forgot how to write properly, so I spent hours at the kitchen table practicing my signature over and over like a kindergartner, learning cursive, trying to make my name look like something that belonged to me. I fell twice in the first month home. The first time was in the bathroom, reaching for a towel that seemed impossibly high, even though it hung in the same place it had for 15 years. I caught myself on the sink edge, bruising my ribs but keeping my dignity intact. The second time was worse. In the kitchen, my legs just forgot how to hold me up. I lay on the linoleum floor for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how quiet a house becomes when you're the only heartbeat inside it. That's when I called you about moving in. Just temporarily, I said. Just until I got stronger, until the physical therapy took hold, until I could trust my body again. Mom, you said, and I could hear Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and urgent like a bird warning of storms. Mom, we just don't have the space right now. The kids' schedules are crazy. And Jessica's starting her new job. No space. In your 4-bedroom house with the 3-car garage, and the guest room you use as an office for storing things you never look at. No space for the woman who made space for you in her body, in her life, in every decision she made for 37 years. Maybe we could look into some nice assisted living places, you suggested, your voice taking on that careful tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable, while delivering unreasonable news. Somewhere with activities and people your age. You might even like the social aspect. Social aspect. As if loneliness was a choice I'd made instead of a sentence you'd helped write. One polite rejection at a time. So here I am, Michael. Room 247 at Sunset Manor, where they serve dinner at 4:30 sharp and lock the doors at 9 p.m. like we're children, who might wander off into the night if left unsupervised. The woman next door, Eleanor, cries for her daughter every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, her voice thin as tissue paper but persistent as rainfall. "Rebecca!" she calls through the wall that separates our matching rooms. "Rebecca, where are you? I made your favorite cookies. I don't call for you anymore. My voice has learned the taste of silence, the way words can pile up in your throat, like stones, until speaking becomes impossible. Instead, I sit by my single window that faces the parking lot and watch cars that might be yours, though none of them ever are. I've memorized the schedule of everyone who visits here. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter comes Tuesdays with grocery store flowers. Mr. Williams's son arrives Sundays in a blue pickup truck, and the Johnson family has dinner here every second Saturday. 4 generations crowded around a cafeteria table, loud and messy and beautiful. But here's what I need you to know, son, the thing I couldn't say that awful Tuesday, when you dropped off my 2 suitcases and spoke those words that live in my bones, now like arthritis, aching worse on rainy days. I would carry your weight again. Every sleepless night when you had colic and I walked the hallway holding you against my chest, feeling your tiny heartbeat against mine. Every overtime shift to pay for your dreams. Every aching foot and bleeding heel and morning, I woke up wondering how I'd make it through another day of being everything you needed. Every moment of worry when you were late coming home from dates. Every prayer I whispered into the darkness, asking God to keep you safe in a world that breaks hearts and spirits with casual cruelty. Every sacrifice that made me smaller so you could grow bigger, I would make again gladly, because that's what love does, Michael. It carries weight, it chooses the heavy burdens, and calls it privilege. It transforms exhaustion into purpose, and makes every ache feel like accomplishment. You called me a burden, but the only thing heavy here is the part of my heart that used to believe my love mattered to you. The rest of me, the part that remembers rocking you through thunderstorms and celebrating every A on your report card, and feeling my chest swell with pride every time someone said you had my eyes. The rest of me still breathes, still hopes, still loves you with a fierceness that would terrify you if you knew its true weight. I keep this letter pressed between the pages of my Bible, right in 1 Corinthians, where Paul writes about love being patient and kind. Some days I read it out loud to the empty air, pretending you're sitting in the vinyl chair across from my bed, really listening for once instead of checking your phone or glancing at your watch. Some days I just hold it against my chest and remember when you were small enough to carry, back when being your everything felt like the greatest privilege in the world. Instead of the burden you've taught me, it became. Maria brought me a new church bulletin today. Tomorrow's sermon is about forgiveness, and I think I'll go. Not to learn how to forgive you, Michael. I did that the day you were born, the moment I decided your happiness mattered more than my own hurt. But maybe to learn how to forgive myself for loving you too much, for carrying weight you never asked me to bear, for being the kind of mother who would rather break her own back than let her child fall. The truth is, I'm still carrying you. Every morning when I wake up in this narrow bed and remember where I am and why, I carry the weight of wondering if you're happy, if Jessica is good to you, if the children know they have a grandmother who would love them boundlessly if given the chance. I carry the weight of your childhood, every bedtime story, and scraped knee and proud moment, preserved like flowers pressed between the pages of my memory. I carry the weight of your absence, too. The phone calls that don't come. The holidays I spend here instead of around a table where I could watch my grandchildren grow. The feeling of being forgotten by the person who was once my whole reason for getting up in the morning. Even this weighs less than you might think, because love, real love, the kind that transforms coal into diamonds under pressure, makes even absence feel precious. The nurses here think I'm depressed. They keep suggesting activities, bingo on Wednesday nights, crafts in the community room, movie nights where we watch films from before you were born. But I am not depressed, sweetheart. I'm just heavy with love that has nowhere to go, with stories no one wants to hear, with the accumulated weight of a lifetime spent carrying someone who eventually grew strong enough to walk away. P.S. I still have that red Schwinn bicycle in storage unit 43 on Elm Street. The key is taped under the jewelry box with your baby pictures, right next to the ballerina who still dances to Für Elise when you wind her up. I thought maybe, someday, when Sarah or little Michael are old enough to ride with streamers flying and bells ringing. But I suppose that's just another burden to carry, isn't it? Dreams we hold for grandchildren who will never know our names, never hear the stories of how much we wanted to love them if we'd been given the chance. The storage unit costs $68 a month, money I could use for things I actually need. But some weights are worth carrying, even when no one understands why we refuse to set them down. Dorothy sealed this letter 6 weeks ago and has read it every night since, by the light of her bedside lamp in room 247. She tells me she's not sure she'll ever be brave enough to send it. But sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply write down the truth, even if no one else ever reads it. The letter lives in her Bible now, growing soft from handling, the edges worn smooth like beach glass from all the nights she's held it, while wondering if love can be too much, if mothers can care too deeply, if the weight we carry for our children might sometimes crush us both. If this letter touched your heart tonight, leave a comment below. What would you say to a mother who poured everything into raising a child, only to be called a burden when she needed love in return? Have you ever written words you couldn't send? Have you ever loved someone so completely it hurt? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more letters like this one, because everyone deserves to have their story heard, even the stories that were never meant to be sent. Sometimes the heaviest letters are the ones that never leave our hands, the words we write in the darkness for people who have learned to live without our light.